welcome to All Things Possible TV. I'm excited to have you here with me. I'm Kris Barney, and I'm thrilled that you are watching this episode. This episode is, are you a receiver or are you a taker? Last week, our episode was, are you a giver or a taker? And I told you then that I would be expounding on that and giving you a little bit more in depth of the difference between a receiver and a taker. Because without receivers, we can't be givers. There can't be any givers if there's no receivers. So we're going to jump in and get started with this and just really go into some deeper depth, because it's very important for you to realize what you are doing and be able to alter or change that if it needs to be. And the other side of that is that you recognize that in our world, we have to have givers and receivers, but we also have to have a balance between that giver and taker. And there is a big, big difference between being a taker and a receiver. So we're going to talk about that. First, before we even get started, I want you to be able to be a receiver, and I want to give you the opportunity to do a one-on-one appointment with me. I would like to do a strategy session with you. You need to go to my website. It's right here on the screen for you, but I'd like for you to go to my website at www.allthingspossible.biz. Again, www.allthingspossible.biz. It will give you the opportunity to jump in and join our 7 traits. That will give you 7 videos, and they're 30-minute videos of the 7 traits to live by to have all things possible in your life. So that's my gift to you. I want you to be a receiver, but I also have, if you'll go to the Contact Us and send me a message, I would love to be able to do a one-on-one session with you to move you forward. So that is my free gift to you if you want to jump on and take advantage of that. So go to the website. Even if you want to pause it right now, jump on the website and be able to take advantage of that, because sometimes we forget when we go back. But let's move right forward. First, I want to kind of give you a rundown, a little bit of a review, but a little bit of a rundown of giver-taker. There are several that I brought up in my last episode and chatted with you about how to define that, how to recognize it, and some of the things that happen when we are in the middle of it. This week, I just want to give you kind of a rundown of some of the ones that I came up with that if you were on my email, you got it in the email as well. A couple of them we didn't cover in the video. I had too much to cover all of it in 30 minutes. But I want to just kind of give you a rundown of some of the things that can help you to recognize if you're being a giver versus a taker, and then we'll get into the receiver and taker end. First off is, are you one that compliments people? A complimenting person is a giver. You're giving a compliment. Or are you the one that complains? Is things never good enough? You complain about the service at the restaurant, the way people treat you, the way people are at the stoplight, how people merge in traffic. Are you the complainer? Next one, do you assist others? Do you do it without being asked? Or are you happy to avoid others? Avoid being the one that's asked to help out. Avoid being the one that's involved. Do you find good in others? Do you look for the good things? Do you give them the benefit of the doubt? Or do you look for the bad? Are you in judgment and continually looking for their faults and making sure everyone else knows about them? Right? Are we looking and going, wow, she's gained some pounds, right? Okay. Are you the one that's usually listening in the conversation or the talking end of the conversation? Now, this one can be a little tricky, because in marriage, a lot of us want to say, oh, that's the wife, that's the husband. A lot of men don't like to talk things out. They want it to be short and sweet and done, and a lot of women have to talk. So some of that is our emotional baggage and our emotional needs, not necessarily us being a taker. But listen when you're at work. Listen when you're with your kids. Are you talking more than you're giving? Are you listening? You need to be the judge of that one. Do you serve and find service something that is an everyday thing? Do you find ways to serve and you have an abundance of ideas? Or do you look for the handout. Look for the good deal. Look for where's the next bargain. What am I going to get if I do this? Are you looking for something in return for when you serve? Do you do more than is expected? Do you jump in and do more than is expected of you? Or do you do that bare minimum? Do you do just enough to get past and do it? Okay, that taker does bare minimum to get by. Now sometimes we do bare minimum on one thing and then we go over the top on something else. Just because you do it once doesn't mean you're always a taker. But doing bare minimum consistently is a taker. Okay, are you mostly positive? Are you positive and happy with yourself? Are you positive and happy with others around you? Or are you the one that is mostly in the negative, frustrated, sharing all that's going wrong at your house with all the coworkers? Are you the negative one? Are you the one that's always in doubt and reserved and like, oh, we don't want to do this because, you know, what's in it for me? Okay, does that make sense? Are you the one that forgives? Do you forgive easily and abundantly and it's just like, you know what, let's forgive, forget, let go? Or are you the one that hangs on to that and just has it so you can resurface it at another time? You can be in judgment and you can decide whether they deserve to be forgiven or not, right? If the situation is okay or not, you are the one that gets to judge. Okay, so be aware of that. Another one is, do you look for recognition in all that you do? Or do you, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Do you not look for recognition? So do you do it without telling everyone about it, without bragging and boasting and, you know, posting on Facebook to make sure everybody knows you did a good deed? Or are you the one that has to just tell everyone, make sure everybody knows and you get credit? What I can tell you is that if that is what you want, if you're in it for what you're going to receive from that acknowledgement and for people to recognize you, that is your payment. If you're living a life of abundance and you're putting out there what you want to get back, if you are just shouting from the rooftops, oh, I did this and I did this and I did this and it's my month of service and here's the 30 things I've done, that's your recognition. That's it. So that's what's coming back to you. And the recognition can be enough. If that's enough for you, great. But sometimes we want more. Sometimes we do it out of the goodness of our heart and we want to spread good things. So if you're wanting to spread good things, you don't necessarily have to announce that you're doing it. So that's kind of a long list to kind of get you thinking, but I want to get you in the mindset of the giver-taker, because it's in all aspects of our life. There's always an opposite in everything that we do. There's always a different perspective, a different way to look at it, as somebody doing it differently than we did. And to do that and to actually take an honest look at ourselves and evaluate where we are, sometimes we have to take a step back and go, okay, so am I the one that's always talking? Am I the one that's always got to have the story or the last word? Or, you know, really look at these, because before we know it, what is happening on a daily basis becomes our habits. And our habits become what our responses are. The things that we do and that we have these habits that form, they become our reality. And to become our reality, at some point, we have to recognize what's happening. Because if we're not getting the results that we really want, we need to look at the facts. Let's look at what's happened. Let's look at our results, right? So let's talk about the receiver versus the taker. Now, a receiver is one that deserves to receive, right? Let me give you a story. My son, and for those of you who watch a lot of episodes, you've heard about my son, my oldest son, who's had cancer twice. The second time that he had cancer, he broke his back in September on Labor Day, and it will be 3 years in just a few days. And he broke his back. He had this leave, and when he came back to work and we had Thanksgiving, he was having headaches so bad we had to take him into the hospital, and they found a brain tumor. Well, he had 3 brain tumors. It grew back 3 times in 5 months. So he had 3 surgeries, take his skull off, take the brain tumor out, and it's a very tedious process and lots of recovery. Having a broken back and the brain tumors, and in the end had radiation. So all in 7 months total. Horrible year. And tons of medical. Thousands and thousands of dollars. But this is my son Jesse. He had cancer when he was young, and if you've watched the episodes, you've heard the story of the balloon, how we learned that we had to take our focus off of ourselves and we had to go out and do something for others. And we started doing this balloon project. And it became a process that got us through some really difficult times, but it also taught us that others had it worse than we did. A lot worse. And there were a lot of people that we were able to be givers for to make a difference in their life and move them forward when they were sitting in a hospital and they were young and they didn't have visitors or whatever the case may be. We were able to let them be receivers because we were giving. We couldn't have been givers if there weren't receivers. There was no way. If no one was there to take a balloon, to actually accept it, we could not have been givers. We'd be like, okay, we're going to keep the balloon ourselves, right? So there's a big need for receivers, and being on the receiving end is tough. Let's go back to this cancer story. We had thousands and thousands of medical bills. We were selling vehicles. At this point, my son was 26, owned a home, he was single, and his job, he'd been off enough, they were trying to force him into taking a disability, and it wasn't necessarily his job that was trying to do it, but some of the programs that the government has for us, and it was not working. So he had to go on COBRA insurance, no help whatsoever financially, no paycheck, and now we're trying to save his home, save his vehicles, save his stuff. He was selling every toy, every trailer, four-wheeler, all his stuff, so that he could afford to keep some stuff and not lose everything and still pay the bills. Well, we had never been on the receiving end. We have been on the giving end a ton. And I tell you stories to let you know of different ideas that you can do, not hopefully that you understand, not to brag and boast, because that's not the way I like to do it. But we had been giving, we'd been selling, we've been doing all these things to keep him on top of it, and it just kept getting out of hand. Even when he lost his hearing, the hearing aids were $20,000 and no help. Insurance wouldn't pay a dime. And at that point, we had to save a house, not hearing aids. So his coworkers at work started to be like, oh, we're going to do fundraisers, we're going to help you, we're going to do something, since we can't give you our hours, we can't donate anything to you, we want to help. So they set up a yard sale, friends set up a yard sale, all these people started doing service. Well, that was tough. That was one of the toughest things I ever had to do, is ask for help and to receive. I was like, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be on the other end. I am not supposed to be the person that is taking, right? Or receiving from people. I was just like, I'm not telling anyone, okay? Step back with me. When he was 9, we got done with that hospital stay. We had $80,000 in medical bills. 11 months, and we've been paying thousands every month. In the end, we owed $80,000. We had to sell our house, live in a trailer while we built another home. It was ugly, and we wouldn't accept help. We did not tell anyone we weren't having Christmas. We did not do any of those things. Yet, we weren't gracious receivers either. It was a really hard time. I want to go back to that story in a little bit and tell you about being a receiver on Christmas, but let me finish this other story. At this point with this child, we were to the point we had to do something else. We had to be receivers. And I actually had to ask for help for my son. That was a tough position, because we'd always been able to take care of ourselves. We'd never had to take from anyone. And now we had to accept help from everyone. It became a big community event. And we were able to buy his hearing aids, pay his COBRA payments, and continue to have insurance. Now, it was unbelievable. We had some amazing, amazing people donate money to have fun. We had a blog out there you could donate to. It was definitely a challenge, but it was a really big eye-opener for me because I'd always been on the giving end, always been the one giving and not expecting in return, giving in secret. And yet we got a donation, and it was a donation for $1,000, and it was anonymous. We have no idea who it is. We have our suspicions, but we have no concrete evidence of who that is from. That's a weird feeling to be in because we had a lot of donations that we knew where they came from, very gracious, very large donations that we really appreciated. But we had the opportunity to thank them. We had the opportunity to be involved. But this anonymous one was really tough because we were like, God, who did it? Who did this? Who donated online and that we don't know about, that did this? Well, I guess they did it at the bank. Who did this? Because we had a fund set up. It was great to be on the receiving end of that. It was great to be on the receiving end where I knew that that could go to benefit my son, that he'd be able to hear again, that he'd be able to be insured. We could have done it long term without any help whatsoever. We would have had to sell his house. We would have had to do a few things like that, and I'm sure we could have gotten through it. But the way the community came together, at his work, it changed the whole parameters of the city. He works for the city, and they had, the parks crew was one crew, the streets crew was another crew. They bickered back and forth. It was always somebody else's fault. This brought them all together because where he worked for a city, they couldn't do it on a city level, so they had to rent the equestrian center to have a yard sale and bring all this stuff together, and they sold thousands of dollars that day. It was amazing to see people from his work, people from the community would come and pay double what anything was worth because they knew it was going to a good cause. Being on the receiving end was difficult at first to even accept help. But when we got to the point where we went, oh my gosh, we do this all the time and we've never had to really be on the other end to see what a difference it makes. We've always seen that, oh, let's help people out, let's do this. But we hadn't been on the other end. It was phenomenal to be on the end of seeing others be able to give, to be able to be givers, and to phenomenally help us in a way that we couldn't help ourselves. It was fantastic to see the community come together and to see the difference, especially with the employees and the co-workers that got along, that came together for a good cause, and really, really made a difference for his life. They're lifelong friends. They're lifelong friends with us, with him, and in the community. It hit the newspapers. There was a big deal made of this. All the whole involvement, the community involvement, and the fact that he'd had cancer. He'd been, when he was younger, he'd been with the American Cancer Society, he'd been an ambassador. And so it was a really good story that he could follow, what he was then to what he was now, and this big contribution to society. When the fires came through shortly after his radiation, just a couple weeks after, and it burned 4 homes to the ground, it was in my neighborhood. It was right here in the mountains where I live, and we had this massive wildfire that came through. And when he was the first one to go to a neighbor's place and to volunteer to be of service, even though he could hardly stand at the time. He just shook at that railing and rang the doorbell and said, "What can I do?" And you've probably heard that part of the story. Obviously, this receiver immediately turned back into a giver, didn't he? He immediately was, what can I do? How can I serve? What can I do? What can I do to make a difference? That's the difference. When you're a taker, it's, what can you do for me? So much of the time we think that a taker is the person that's, takes advantage of us and, always gets the better end of the deal. But there's also those takers like, do you sit on the couch while your wife does the dishes? Do you not help out and do your part? Are you both working? And that's what happens is you sit on the couch and take a break and she's working. Or are you the one that is taking it pretty easy during the day and hubby's out working and yet you still want him to do his part when he gets home? We need to be really careful of that taker. We can take advantage of people really easy if we're not careful. And it's really one of those situations where we need to evaluate how much of a taker we're being. Are we negative all the time? Do we complain? Do we judge others? Do we take and always avoid people? Do we avoid being involved because we might have to volunteer? Do we avoid taking those positions that are volunteer positions at the school, at the community? Maybe it's our church. Do we not willingly volunteer or accept the opportunity to serve? Is it the same dad that coaches the Little League team and the soccer team and the football team, and you aren't helping out? Are you being the mom, the team mom? There are so many times that we can take advantage of being a giver, and it does us good. We get to look at, are we trying to always take a handout? You know, I laugh and I make too many references to this, but our government did this big buyout of vehicles and stuff, and all these big things recently didn't work because the takers showed up in big full force and took advantage of it, but it didn't really get us anywhere because it didn't turn them into givers. It reinforced the taker side, and it didn't pull the economy out like it should have. But that's because the taker mentality was rewarded. When we reward the taker mentality, we do it more. Meaning, when you get what you want by whining, you whine more. Let's talk about a toddler. If a toddler wants your attention, he throws a fit, whines, kicks and screams, but gets what he wants, that is the action he's going to do next time. So if the taker in him finds out that's how you make the system work, he'll repeat it. Same thing in adults. If the taker side wins, it will be repeated. Meaning, if you and your husband are trying to come up with, you know, an agreement, an arrangement, whether it's vacation plans or date night plans, and you're the one that says, oh, I don't care, whatever, okay, that's fine. Then you get there and you complain, you're upset, you didn't like it, it wasn't what you wanted, and you, in the end, are the taker of, I had no input in the beginning, but I want to complain about it in the end. You'll repeat that behavior over and over if you get what you want out of it. We need to be careful because taker mentality is totally the wrong avenue. It does not bring more abundance. It repels. It repels everyone from not wanting to spend time with you, not wanting to be your friend, not being able to be around you. I'll give you another example. This was a very harsh example for me. During a really hard time in my life, I had a lot going on. I'd had my son with cancer. I'd had a lot going on for several years. Well, after that, I had my twin brother committed suicide, and shortly after that suicide, I went into severe depression. On top of the depression, we had issues with my daughter's head and her school growing. I became a very negative person. I was a taker, and full-fledged taker. I was in depression, frustrated, and most of the time I put this happy face on and pretended that I was okay to almost everyone. But I had a very dear friend, and I felt I could be myself. And I ended up being a very heavy, hard person. I was a friend that was a taker. And I was complaining, I was negative, I did minimum effort. I was a good friend in the fact that, oh, I remember your birthday and I do all these things to make you feel good, but get me on the phone, I'm on there for an hour and I'm complaining and everything's wrong and things are bad, right? What happened in that was my friend said, I can't do this. I can't do it, you're just too negative. And I can't be around it. Hardest thing I've ever faced. The best friend I've ever had, and she couldn't take me. She couldn't take that in her life. Biggest blessing in my life for me to have a wake-up call. That was a smack in the face of me being in the negative and dwelling there. That was the beginning of me taking on this, you know what, people ask me how I get through hard things all the time. I get to buck up and be there. I know what to do, and I know how to help others get through it too. But it was a harsh moment for me because I did not want to lose this relationship I had with this friend. We even had a conversation, and most of it was taken wrong on both parts because she had all these feelings of what she thought was going on. I had all this of like, abandonment, what's going on for me. And it completely was taken out of context, and things happened differently than they really were. All because I'd been a taker. And all because I'd been in judgment. I wanted everyone to know what was going on, and I really was doing minimum effort and being very negative. I was looking for what I could get out of this and not participating on the level that I needed to. It was a good time for me to take a look and go, wow, I need to do life different. I can be a contribution rather than a taker. We don't need to be a taker. If you're in a taker mode and you have some of this stuff going on, it doesn't matter if it's your health, it doesn't matter if it's your kids, it doesn't matter if it's stress. You're at choice. You have to choose if you want to be a giver or a taker and how far you want to take it. Do you want people to avoid you? Do you want people to give up a perfectly good relationship? Do you want to lose good friends? Because it happens. And it's not a happy time. You get to choose. You're at choice, and you get to make the difference in your life. There are many things you can do differently. In a 30-minute session with me on this TV station, it's going to get you thinking about things, but it's not going to get you to move forward and take all the action that you need to take. So I would like to offer to you the opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation with me. Let's do a strategy session together. Go to my website at www.allthingspossible.biz. Again, that's www.allthingspossible.biz. Join my email. You'll get the 7 traits to change your life. Traits to live by. And one of those is being positive. It is moving forward, being a giver, serving, and doing those things that make you happy. I also want to offer to you a strategy session. You can go to the contact us and send me an email and say, hey, I would like to get my strategy session. I saw this on your show and I would like to get my strategy session. I would love to work with you, and I would love to have the opportunity to just bounce some ideas back and forth of ways that you can change your life. You can move forward. You don't have to be a taker. You don't have to be the person that takes advantage of the situation and that always tries to be a receiver, which isn't a receiver. A receiver is someone who is gracious enough to accept the help. Usually not the person that signs up for that. Usually it's someone that has to be coaxed, and people have to say, you really get to do this because you deserve it and you need the help right now. I know right now I have a really dear friend that's going through cancer, and it's been an honor to be able to be a giver to her through this tough time. She had a hard time being the receiver, yet she's been a giver the whole time. What you put out comes back. Put out the giver energy. Help others, assist, send service. Make that change and help other people in their lives. Because when you need it, it will be there for you. Thanks for joining me today on All Things Possible TV. I'm Kris Barney. It's been an awesome time having you here with me. I want to encourage you to be that giver. Be the receiver. It's tough to be a receiver when you've been a giver. Be a receiver, but let's not be a taker. And let's recognize those different things that we talked about, even others. There's lots and lots on that list of taker. Recognize the things that you are doing. Let's make positive steps forward to change for the better. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time on All Things Possible TV. Bye-bye.